Get out of here, you worthless excuse for a person. Finally, the gold digger is leaving. My husband David and FIL Joseph looked at me with contempt. Their sneering faces were identical, a testament to their kinship. Beside them, MIL Sarah and CL Linda tried to stifle their laughter. It was uncanny how much they resembled each other in the worst possible way. For 2 years, I endured their constant harassment. They exploited my timid nature, using me as their punching bag. But I've reached my limit. I listened in silence as they hurled insults at me. Seeing my passive response, they only intensified their verbal assault. They had no idea. What awaited them was a hell they couldn't imagine. My name is Nancy, and I turned 30 this spring. After graduating from college, I worked as a typical office lady in the city. My life consisted of commuting between home and the office, and I worried I'd remain single forever. Then, one day, everything changed. While traveling with friends, I had a fateful encounter. It's quite rare to have young visitors in such a remote place. I'm pleasantly surprised. The one who greeted us at the remote hotel was David, who was single at the time. His family ran the hotel, and he was training to take over as the second-generation owner. David wasn't particularly handsome, but his kind smile captivated me instantly. Gathering my courage, I asked for his contact information, and we gradually grew closer. Actually, I've been thinking about you ever since I first saw you, Nancy. After one of our many dinners, he confessed, his face flushing red. I was overjoyed to know our feelings were mutual, and I eagerly accepted his confession. After 3 years of dating, we got married. His home was far from mine, which worried my family. Don't worry. David's parents and his sister Linda are kind. There's nothing to be concerned about. I was a bit sad to leave the company I had worked at since college, but I quickly settled into my new life, working at the hotel after our wedding. The family home was on the same property as the hotel, making my commute easier compared to my days working in Los Angeles. However, my carefree thoughts soon vanished. Nancy, there are wrinkles in the laundry. Oh, I'm sorry. Really, have you never done laundry properly before? The one complaining is Sarah. Sarah, who used to seem like a pleasant hotel owner, gradually began to criticize me more after the wedding. Hey Nancy, can you finish this job for me? I need to go pick up the kids. Yes, I understand. Linda, who initially seemed kind, now treated me like a convenient servant. She had returned to live with the family after her divorce a few years ago, and her child, much like her mother, was quite spoiled. Honestly, Sarah and Linda overwork you. If you need help, come to me. Joseph appeared kind on the surface, but his eyes were filled with blatant lust when he looked at me. There was a time when he walked in on me while I was showering. It was an accident, he said, but his face was twisted in a grin. Is this how my life will be from now on? 6 months into the marriage, Sarah's verbal abuse became relentless. Linda began stealing my belongings and money. And Joseph started openly trying to touch me. I was reaching my breaking point. In tears, I finally turned to David for help. But my family would never do such things, he shouted at me, his face red with anger, refusing to listen. From that point on, he also began to harass me. I wish I had dated you longer. Then I would have realized how useless you are. By the time a year had passed since our wedding, I had grown accustomed to hearing such remarks from him. Harassment from my in-laws became a daily occurrence, and I survived by numbing my emotions. But then, one day, Nancy, come with me. Huh? Where are we going? Sarah glared at me sharply as she answered. To the gynecologist. Since you haven't gotten pregnant yet, we need to get you checked out.
What?
I had grown used to enduring everything with a blank expression, but this shocked me. Sarah, seemingly pleased with my reaction, grabbed my arm firmly. "Let's go."
Wait.
Sarah was large and strong, and my resistance was futile. She dragged me to the gynecologist, where I was examined thoroughly. The result was that I had difficulty conceiving. The doctor said it wasn't impossible for me to get pregnant, but it would be challenging. As soon as Sarah heard the diagnosis,
I knew it.
she lashed out at me. When we got home, Sarah told Linda and Joseph that I couldn't get pregnant. Before I could correct her and explain that it was just a difficulty, not an impossibility, they began to insult me.
If I had known David's wife was useless like this, I wouldn't have let him marry you.
Exactly.
I supported you because I expected you to bear the third generation of the hotel. But now that you're useless, there's no need to protect you. At least serve as our labor force. We should just get a divorce immediately. There's no need to keep someone useless around.
I couldn't even cry at the barrage of cruel words. All I could do was endure. My marriage was a huge mistake. His words cut the deepest. There was no one here to help me. That realization hit me hard. Still, I wanted to have his child because we were married. I thought maybe if we had a child, the criticism from his family might lessen. With a small glimmer of hope, I decided to talk to David one day.
David, can we talk?
Huh? Does it matter to me? David, sitting in his usual spot in the living room reading a magazine, didn't even look at me. Recently, David either ignored me or responded coldly when I tried to talk to him. But I mustered my courage and spoke up.
I want to try fertility treatment.
If we underwent fertility treatment, surely we could have the child everyone wanted. Before I could finish, David's angry voice cut me off.
What? We don't have money for that.
Suddenly shouting, David threw the magazine he was reading at me. I was so shocked that I stood there, dumbfounded.
It's your fault for not being able to get pregnant properly. If you really want treatment, pay for it yourself. But I don't have any money.
After our wedding, Sarah took my debit card away. She claimed it was to prevent unnecessary spending, but she probably just didn't like me having financial freedom. Though I hadn't shared my PIN, preventing her from using it, I had no money of my own. I never received a salary for working at the hotel. Given these circumstances, I had no money of my own.
I know. I'll get a job outside. What? Sarah said our finances are tight recently. If I work outside, I can help with expenses.
Our hotel wasn't doing badly, but my in-laws were extravagant spenders, keeping the household finances always tight. I thought this was a great idea. But to David, it was just another reason to be angry.
Nancy, you're recognized in the community as my wife. If my wife starts working outside, people will think our business is struggling. Can't you understand that? But how else can I make money then? I don't care.
With that, he stormed off, leaving me alone. I couldn't go out to work, nor could I afford fertility treatments.
What am I supposed to do?
All that was left for me was a sense of hopelessness. For the past 2 years of our marriage, I had endured constant harassment from my in-laws. Recently, they didn't even call me by my name, referring to me as useless, incompetent, or simply you. I was no longer his wife, I was the servant of my in-laws. In the beginning, I cried a lot, but now I felt nothing. Would I spend my entire life as a servant to this family? The never-ending days were taking a toll on my heart. Lately, the stress had built up so much that I couldn't sleep properly. Though I thought I had become numb, my heart was silently screaming in agony.
Ugh!
The continuous lack of sleep caused me to feel dizzy. As usual, I started cleaning the hotel alone from the early morning before anyone else woke up. If I didn't finish before the family woke up, I might be punished by skipping breakfast. Fighting the dizziness, I kept working. "Ah, you're already up." A sudden voice from behind startled me so much that I almost jumped.
"Joseph, you're up early."
"I'm old, so I don't sleep well," Joseph said with a big yawn. I wished he would help since he was up early, but I kept my thoughts to myself and continued working. "You don't look well."
"Let me see,"
he said, persistently closing the distance between us. His eyes were filled with a disgusting leer, and I finally realized the danger of being alone with him. As his hand reached for my waist, I quickly stepped back, feeling nauseous.
"I'm fine. I'll just go clean outside."
I hurried outside, and he didn't follow me. I collapsed on the road in front of the hotel. "I can't take this anymore." Tears began to fall as I muttered those words. My heart had finally reached its limit. I reached for the mobile phone in my pocket and called my dad. Knowing that Dad was usually up early for his morning walk, I instinctively dialed his number despite my confusion.
"Nancy, what's wrong?"
As expected, Dad answered immediately, and I tearfully explained the situation. I want a divorce. I want to come home." Dad listened silently, then spoke gently.
"All right, I'll come get you right away. Can you wait a little? I won't forgive those who have tormented my precious daughter."
Dad's voice was kind, but he couldn't hide his anger towards my in-laws. After that, I went to the city hall and got the divorce papers. I filled them out and presented them to David and the others who were now awake. Oh, really? I expected David to yell at me, but he signed the divorce papers without hesitation and handed them back to me. A bit surprised, I took them, and David said with a twisted expression,
"I was planning to divorce you soon anyway, since you can't have kids and can't do the hotel work properly.
You've saved me the trouble. Right, everyone?" David turned to face his family as he spoke.
"That's right. We don't have the luxury to support someone useless."
Exactly.
"She's totally worthless. She used to have some value because she had money, but now her wallet is empty."
"She's completely useless."
"Yes, indeed. At the very least, she could have told me the PIN for the debit card I kept for her."
Sarah and Linda directed their identical nasty smiles at me. Joseph, his pride hurt by my earlier rejection, nodded at David's words and spoke.
"David's right. Get lost quickly, you failure."
David burst out laughing at Joseph's words.
"Well said, Dad. Ah, I feel relieved. Finally, the gold digger is gone."
Seeing his twisted face, I felt a wave of nausea rise within me. Why did I ever fall for such a terrible person? Was my judgment that poor? In the past, I wouldn't have felt anything when they hurled insults at me. But now, I was regaining my emotions. Seeing my in-laws' twisted faces, anger welled up inside me. A few hours after I called Dad, I received a call that he had arrived at the hotel, and I sighed in relief. Mom was preparing to welcome me back home, so Dad and my brother Brian were the ones who came. I gathered my few belongings and headed to the entrance. Over the past 2 years, Linda had stolen or Sarah had thrown away many of my things, so my possessions had dwindled to a small, easily manageable amount.
"Well, I'm leaving now."
"Wait. We won't be satisfied unless we say a few words to your family. We're coming with you." My in-laws followed me with lecherous smiles. But as soon as we stepped outside, their smiles froze.
Is this a luxury car?"
David's words echoed my own surprise. Parked in front of the hotel was a car so luxurious that even someone like me, who knew little about cars, could recognize it. My family didn't own such a car. As I looked around, thinking it must belong to someone else, Dad got out of the driver's seat.
"I'm here to pick you up, Nancy."
"Dad? What is this car?" Before Dad could answer, the back seat door opened, and a large figure emerged. The man looked at David standing behind me and narrowed his eyes as he spoke.
"Long time no see, David."
"David. You're Nancy's brother." David pointed at Brian, his face slightly pale. Yes, this large man was my younger brother.
"No way. At the wedding, he was just a normal size."
David's shock was understandable. Brian had become fascinated with professional wrestling just before I got married. Back then, he was a university student, but he repeatedly asked our parents if he could become a professional wrestler. He worked part-time while pursuing his dream. During the 2 years since David last saw him, Brian had been relentlessly training his body. As a result, he had become a man so muscular that David and my in-laws were visibly intimidated. I wasn't too surprised because I had seen Brian's updates on social media, but seeing him in person was a bit overwhelming. Even though I knew about Brian's transformation, I was taken aback by his imposing presence. My in-laws were probably even more shocked.
"I've heard from Dad. It seems Nancy has been quite taken care of."
Brian glared at my in-laws with sharp eyes. His body wasn't the only thing that had changed in the past 2 years. Brian, who used to have a gentle face, now had eyes as sharp as blades, piercing through my in-laws. His expression conveyed a barely contained fury. David, standing in front of Brian, looked like he might run away at any moment. Despite his impressive physique now, Brian used to be very dependent on me. When he was little, he often got sick and missed school frequently. "I want to play outside," he would say, almost in tears, lying in bed. I would read him storybooks and watch TV with him to keep him company.
"Nancy, read this next,"
he would say, holding out a book with a feverish smile. I would stroke his head and read to him until he fell asleep. I was 5 years older than Brian and doted on him, which probably led to him developing a bit of a sister complex. I remember when I was in high school and got dumped badly, Brian was furious and wanted to storm to my ex-boyfriend's house. By then, he was no longer weak and was taller than me, so it was tough to stop him. Even after I got married, Brian's sister complex remained, and now he stood intimidatingly before my in-laws.
"Brian, you've gotten so big. So, you're here to pick up Nancy, right? Nancy, get in the car and go home,"
David said, his voice trembling slightly, trying to sound gentle. It had been years since he spoke to me so kindly. I couldn't help but smirk at David's pathetic attempt to change his attitude in front of a formidable opponent. Brian seemed to feel the same way. He took a step forward, glaring at David.
"First, you need to take responsibility for what you did to Nancy." "Responsibility? What are you talking about?"
David was sweating profusely, looking around nervously. Unable to meet Brian's intimidating gaze, his eyes darted everywhere.
I am warning you, if you lay a hand on me, I'll call the police."
"Huh?
"Do you think I would hit you?"
"I'd break your bones."
"I don't hit weaklings. I'm not that cruel."
Brian's calm yet threatening words made David's face briefly contort with anger. His useless pride was wounded, but facing such a muscular man, he couldn't muster a retort and bit his lip. Seeing him like this, Brian looked exasperated and turned back to Dad, still in the car. "Dad, bring Anthony over."
"All right,"
Dad replied, stepping out of the driver's seat and opening the passenger door. When the person inside stepped out, my in-laws gasped.
The branch manager! Why are you here?
It wasn't just my in-laws who were surprised.
Anthony! Hey, Nancy, long time no see. Oh, by the way, this car is mine. I splurged a bit.
Anthony waved at me with a smile. Anthony, my uncle, was supposed to be working at a bank's overseas branch. He couldn't attend my wedding due to his busy schedule and had only sent a gift. Since then, we had only exchanged messages. As I struggled to process why he was here, Dad explained. Actually, Anthony returned to the US a few days ago. His overseas assignment ended, and he's back at an American bank. By coincidence, he's now assigned to a bank in the same area where Nancy lives. He was going to contact you when I told him about the divorce, so he decided to come along. Anthony nodded at Dad's explanation, then turned to my in-laws with a smile.
I've visited the local bank as the new branch manager and greeted some of the people who visited the bank for loans. I didn't realize then that Nancy's husband's family owned the hotel. I wasn't able to attend the wedding, and Nancy didn't tell me much about her in-laws' hotel. Plus, I was so busy that the greeting was brief, and we didn't get to introduce ourselves properly. So that's what happened. Wait, a loan? This hotel took a loan from the bank? I didn't know that,
I said, looking at David, who avoided my gaze awkwardly. Well, the business has been struggling recently. I realized that they had taken out a loan without telling me. Thinking back, it did seem like the number of customers had decreased recently. Despite this, the lifestyle of my in-laws hadn't changed, and they hadn't taken any measures to improve the situation. I was appalled by their complacency despite the tough business conditions.
No way! Nancy's uncle is the branch manager of our bank?
Joseph muttered, turning pale. Beside him, Sarah and Linda also looked ashen. Remembering how they had mistreated me, they probably regretted it now. They turned to me with overly friendly smiles.
Oh my, we didn't know your uncle was so important, Nancy. You should have told us.
Really? We're so close, Nancy, why didn't you tell us? Sarah tried to touch me in a friendly manner, but I avoided her.
Don't touch me. Are you planning to pinch me again?
Sarah would pinch my arm when she was especially annoyed. It didn't cause any serious injury, but it was painfully annoying. Surprised that I had exposed her behavior, Sarah's face contorted.
Pinch you? I've never done that to you, Nancy.
Really? Have you also forgotten dragging me to the gynecologist against my will and accusing me of being infertile? Brian's eyes widened as he glared at the in-laws. Dad's face lost all emotion, staring coldly at them. Anthony kept his usual smile, but his eyes were not smiling. With anger hidden in his eyes, Anthony slowly turned to face the in-laws.
Is what you said true? That is. I was just worried about Nancy and took her to the hospital. I never meant any harm. Shut up.
Anthony's smile finally disappeared. He directed his low, dark voice at Sarah, then spoke to Joseph with a stern face.
How dare you mistreat my dear Nancy? The loan deal is, of course, canceled. Go find another bank. With your financial situation, that might be tough. Wait. There seems to be some misunderstanding.
As he said this, Joseph approached me.
Nancy, tell your uncle it was a misunderstanding. Don't come any closer. Are you planning to touch me again?
It was my dad who exploded with anger at these words.
What did you do to my precious daughter?
His face turned red with rage. A loud shout, unlike any I'd ever heard, echoed everywhere. Facing Dad's furious expression.
Eek!
Joseph whimpered. Dad, don't. If we get physical, it will only make things worse. I understand how you feel. I would also love to punch them until their faces are unrecognizable. Brian's harsh words made the in-laws tremble.
If we stay here any longer, someone might get hurt.
Trying to end the confrontation, I stepped forward. I took out my cell phone, opened a recording app, and played the recordings of their insults toward me. Based on these recordings, I will sue you.
What?
Why are you surprised? Did you think I would just quietly divorce you? For the past 2 years, I had been passively obeying my in-laws. But I always held a slight hope that I might leave this house someday. Thinking it might come in handy, I secretly recorded their insults with my cell phone.
Well done, Nancy. I'll find you a great lawyer. Really? That's reassuring.
Casually looking outside the hotel grounds, I noticed that the neighbors had gathered without me realizing it. They had probably heard my dad's enormous shout earlier.
What's all the commotion about?
Isn't she the wife of the hotel owner's son? Taking advantage of this, I loudly declared to the in-laws so that the neighbors could hear.
How dare you harass me for the past 2 years? Forcing me to undergo examinations at the OBGYN, stealing my belongings, touching me. I am not your convenient servant. I'm not a robot who feels nothing when insulted as incompetent or useless.
I thought my tone was a bit theatrical, but this way, the neighbors would know the in-laws' misdeeds.
What? The people from this hotel harassed their son's wife?
That's outrageous. To add the final blow, I played the recordings of the in-laws' insults again. This time loudly enough for the neighbors to hear.
What? This is terrible.
Isn't it understandable if she sues them? Noticing the commotion from the onlookers, the in-laws became visibly unsettled. From now on, their bad reputation would spread throughout the neighborhood. But that was their own fault.
Well then, thank you for these past 2 years.
With a bright smile, I bid the in-laws farewell. They could only watch in despair as I got into Anthony's car. After leaving my in-laws' house, I hired the lawyer Anthony had recommended to file a claim for compensation in the divorce court. Incidentally, I had quickly submitted the divorce application at the city hall on my way back to my parents' house. The lawyer handled the compensation claim for the divorce court, but when I heard the report that it had been a bit of a hassle, I was exasperated. When the lawyer met with the in-laws for the compensation claim, they repeatedly made selfish assertions.
We don't have that kind of money. We absolutely won't pay. That's right. Because of Nancy, we lost the loan.
They shouted at the lawyer, but, "Shall we go to court then?" With this one sentence from the lawyer, they fell silent and eventually agreed to pay the compensation. The in-laws had to sell some of their assets to raise the compensation, but it seemed the real trouble began afterward. Because I had exposed their misdeeds to the neighbors, they were all coldly looked upon by the local community. Linda's mom friends at the preschool her child attended heard the rumors and severed ties with her. Sarah was shunned by the neighborhood ladies and gossiped about. Joseph struggled immensely with the hotel management after the loan was cut off and couldn't find another lender. This was likely due to Anthony, now the branch manager, informing nearby banks about the hotel's precarious situation. In the midst of this, David, through the lawyer, desperately requested to meet with me. I also had things I wanted to say to him, so I decided to meet him one last time. Just in case, I had Brian present as well. When I saw him at the lawyer's office after a long time, he looked quite worn out in such a short period.
Please, come back. Our hotel is in a dire situation. If you come back, the neighbors won't look at us strangely anymore. We need you, Nancy.
David pleaded deeply. I responded in a cold voice to David, who was begging like that.
David, you've never apologized to me, have you?
David looked surprised at my remark. He hadn't apologized until now because he wasn't aware that he had done anything wrong to me. With a big sigh, I said my farewell to David.
Marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life. These past 2 years were a complete waste of time. If I could, I would erase every memory of you. Just thinking about you makes me feel disgusted.
These were the words I wanted to convey to David. Finally saying them made me feel relieved. David burst into tears at my thorough rejection.
Don't play the victim and cry. You don't have the right to do that. Goodbye, and I sincerely hope we never see each other again.
Leaving David collapsing in tears, Brian and I left the lawyer's office. With everything settled, I was living peaceful days back at my parents' house. I had found a new job at a company near my parents' home, and I was planning to move out and live alone once my life settled down. My new job paid a decent salary, enough for me to live independently. Most importantly, the environment where people didn't disregard me was something I was deeply grateful for. I wasn't sure if I would remarry, but for now, I wanted to cherish my time alone. Having made the huge mistake of marrying David, I had lost confidence in my judgment.
Maybe I should ask Anthony to introduce me to someone nice.
Anthony, who had always been fond of me, would surely introduce someone good. But for a while longer, I wanted to take it easy and heal the emotional scars from the past 2 years. And now, Brian was set to make his professional debut in a local wrestling tour. Brian, who had achieved his dream of becoming a professional wrestler, now aimed to reach the top of the wrestling world. Brian, chasing his dream, looked dazzlingly bright. The Brian who used to be so weak had now managed to debut as a professional wrestler. If the pre-marriage me had heard this, I would have been absolutely shocked. I planned to cheer him on at his debut match with my parents and Anthony. Imagining the fun days ahead, I smiled.
Mom!
It had been over 6 months since I'd last heard from my daughter, Violet, when her call came through. And it was past 8 p.m. It was rare for Violet, who had her own family, to call at such an hour unless it was daytime. I instinctively felt that something serious must have happened. Violet? What's going on? Calling at this hour? What happened? At first, Violet didn't respond. All I could hear from the other end of the phone was a quiet voice, as if air was leaking out.
Mom!
With a thin voice, as if squeezing it out, Violet finally spoke. Violet. What's wrong? Are you really okay?
Mom, help me!
Realizing it was an emergency, I hit the speaker button on the phone. Immediately, my husband Matthew rushed to my side, listening intently. Violet, pull yourself together. What happened?
It hurts. I haven't eaten anything. I might not make it.
Haven't eaten anything? What do you mean?
I haven't been given anything to eat by Florence and the others.
The image of Violet crawling on the floor, desperately reaching out to me for help, flashed through my mind.
That's too dangerous for you,
Matthew yelled, grabbing the car keys and heading to the door.
I'm coming to get you right now,
I shouted through the phone, hurrying after Matthew. My name is Sierra Smith. I'm 70 years old. Currently, Matthew and I run a steakhouse together. Matthew, having trained in famous restaurants when he was younger, is well regarded for his skills. Matthew and I met through a relative's introduction, and he opened his own restaurant when we got married. Not only is Matthew skilled in his craft, but his adept conversation skills and unpretentious personality have won over many regular customers. It's been nearly 30 years since I started helping out at the shop, but lately, I've begun to feel my body's decline. Perhaps due to age, I've started to feel pain in my back with just a little movement. Matthew has suggested hiring part-time help, but while grateful for his concern, I worry about labor costs and choose to work while I still can. Sometimes, Matthew jokes, it would have been nice to have her around at times like this, referring to our only daughter, Violet. Since she's already independent and has her own family, we can't ask her to come back home and help with the shop. Violet currently lives with her husband Albert, their son Kendrick, and her mother-in-law Florence in the next town over, about an hour's drive from our home. Recently, her sister-in-law Aurora joined them. I don't know the details, but I heard Aurora returned home after her divorce. I had hoped that Violet would help out at our shop after graduating from college, but Violet left home, saying she wanted to see more of the world. After that, she landed a job at a major department store, working in the ladies' clothing section. Though new to the workforce, Violet quickly won over customers with her charm and inherent cheerfulness. It was there she met her future husband, Albert Adams, who worked in the external sales department, dealing primarily with affluent clients purchasing luxury goods, and was considered a star in one of the company's most prestigious divisions. When Violet first introduced me to Albert, I felt a twinge of unease.
Are you sure it's okay to marry such a perfect man?
Indeed, Albert, with his handsome features and skillful conversation that appealed to women, had won over many customers, some of whom visited the store specifically to see him. Yet, Violet seemed unworried. It's okay, Mom. Don't worry. I trust him. Subsequently, Violet married Albert, and upon doing so, left the department store to devote herself to supporting Albert as a housewife. The following year, the joy of having a grandson, Kendrick, allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief.
It seems, despite everything, those two are doing well.
For a while, the family of 3 lived in an apartment, but 5 years ago, following the death of the father-in-law, they moved to the elderly mother-in-law's house, thinking she would feel lonely by herself. Occasionally, Violet would call home, but she started to lament that Albert was often not around. Albert stayed over at a colleague's apartment again last night because work was late. It's been happening a lot recently. Even on weekends, he's away for golfing with his college. Still, Violet laughed it off over the phone, suggesting it might just be the fate of a working adult. One day, I decided to call Violet after a long time. Kendrick's birthday is coming up, right? Do you have any plans for the day?
So far, we don't have anything planned for the daytime. What's up?
Perfect. Our shop is closed that day, so how about the 3 of us go out somewhere? An amusement park or aquarium, somewhere that would make him happy.
That sounds nice. Recently, Albert's been so busy with work, he hardly comes home. Kendrick has been getting bored without being able to go out.
Violet sounded excited over the phone, but as Kendrick's birthday approached, she called me. I'm sorry, Mom. I hate to say this, but some plans have come up since then. We can't go out with you after all. I'm really sorry.
Plans? What happened?
A kids' club has organized a birthday party, so we can't make it that day.
A kids' club, huh? I guess you can't just cancel on them.
Though disappointed, I switched gears. Then it doesn't have to be Kendrick's birthday. Let us know whenever you're free. I'm sorry, Mom. It doesn't look like we'll be able to go out for a while. Next week, there's a nature class at the kids' club, and the week after that, swimming lessons start. We're just too busy. Elementary school kids these days sure have it tough. It's disappointing, but it seems like giving up is the only option. I had been looking forward to seeing my granddaughter, so my disappointment was significant. I asked some of the parents who are regulars at our restaurant about what gaming consoles are popular with kids these days and sent one to Kendrick. "Mom, the gift arrived." "Thank you." I received a thank you call from Violet. However, something about Violet's voice, which I should be familiar with, felt off to me. Maybe it's a mother's intuition, but Violet, usually bright and cheerful, sounded somehow dark and subdued this day. "What's wrong? You sound tired today."
Not at all. I'm as energetic as ever.
"Is that so?" "Well, if you say so."
Anyway, thanks for the gaming console.
About that. Since I'm not up to date with what elementary school kids like these days, I sent what was recommended to me. Did Kendrick really enjoy it?
Of course he did. He was really happy, saying, "Grandma knows best."
For some reason, Violet seemed in a hurry to end the call, as if she wanted to avoid prolonging our conversation. "Are you guys doing okay?"
Why the sudden concern? We're managing fine. So don't worry about us, Mom.
You've complained before about Albert coming home late. Has anything changed since then?
You worry too much. I told you not to mind it. Forget about that. Look, phone calls aren't free, you know, so I'm going to hang up now. You must be busy with the shop, too.
Just wait a minute. Right now, I'm more concerned about you than. But before I could finish, Violet had already hung up on me. Just by asking about her well-being, why does Violet seem to reject me this much? It's as if she doesn't want me to probe into her family's affairs, dodging my questions and cutting off the conversation unilaterally. I can't shake the feeling that something is not right. I felt a sense of foreboding. After the shop closes, it has become a routine for Matthew and me to have a quiet drink in the living room. That night, as usual, we relaxed, sharing the weariness of the day. It's about Violet. Something seems off. She seems tired, or maybe lacking energy. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Do you call her sometimes?
I just called her this afternoon, but she cut me off abruptly.
Is she keeping you at a distance?
More like she doesn't want to worry me. It might just be my mother's intuition, and I might be wrong, but I feel like Violet is hiding something from me. Matthew crossed his arms and fell silent for a moment before speculating.
Could it possibly be related to that?
To what? After hesitating, as if unsure whether to speak, Matthew seemed to make up his mind.
I heard something troubling from one of our regulars about Albert.
What happened with Albert?
The regular mentioned seeing him coming out of a pub with a woman, not Violet.
That can't be. Albert wouldn't do such a thing.
The woman apparently wasn't young, but was quite beautiful, dressed flamboyantly in what seemed like expensive brands.
It must be a case of mistaken identity. I said this seemingly in defense of Albert. Not so much to defend Albert, but more so because I didn't want to see a rift form between Violet and him, a sentiment more accurately described as parental concern.
Of course, the regular couldn't be sure it was Albert, just someone who looked somewhat like him.
I didn't want to believe this witness account at face value. Yet, I've heard that Albert has been coming home late and going out more on weekends lately. Could it be that he is seeing another woman behind Violet's back, unknown to us? Without any concrete information, my thoughts inevitably drift towards the worst. I'm worried about Violet. She never complains or shows weakness. If she knows about this and is suffering in silence.
Don't think too negatively. I'll see what I can do. For starters, we know a lawyer among our regulars. I'm thinking of consulting him.
Since then, concern for Violet has preoccupied me daily, to the point of accidentally dropping and breaking dishes. What's wrong? You seem tired yourself. I paused my work to call Violet multiple times, but she rarely answered. When she did, her updates were surprisingly brief, simply saying, "I'm fine." But whenever I tried to delve deeper into family matters, she'd laugh it off and hang up quickly. Each time I heard Violet's voice over the phone, it sounded weaker, as if it might fade away at any moment. Recalling Violet's charming, beloved smile before her marriage, I felt increasingly overwhelmed by my growing anxieties, leading to tears. Then, about half a year later, I received a sudden call from Violet, who had not contacted us for some time. And it was past 8 p.m. Such calls from Violet, now with her own family, were rare at this hour unless it was daytime. I instinctively felt that something serious must have happened. Violet? What's going on? Calling at this hour? What happened? Violet didn't respond. All I could hear from the other end of the phone was a quiet voice, as if air was leaking out. Despite holding the receiver, I was certain it was Violet. Is there anyone around you? Are you alone there? The lack of noisy chatter in the background led me to this conclusion.
Mom!
With a feeble voice, as if squeezing it out, Violet finally spoke. Violet. What's wrong? Are you really okay?
Mom, help me!
Sensing an emergency, I pressed the speakerphone button. Matthew quickly came to my side, listening intently. Violet, pull yourself together. Tell Mom what happened.
It hurts. I haven't eaten anything. I might not make it.
Haven't eaten anything? What do you mean?
I haven't been given anything to eat by Florence and the others.
The image of Violet crawling on the floor, desperately reaching out for my help, flashed through my mind.
Violet is in danger,
Matthew yelled, grabbing the car keys and heading towards the entrance.
I'm coming to get you right now,
I shouted through the phone, quickly following Matthew. During the drive, we were silent the entire time. Matthew kept his mouth shut, gripping the steering wheel, his brows furrowed, veins standing out on his forehead. There was an indescribable anxiety and anger at the possibility that our precious Violet was being subjected to injustice. If I looked in the mirror, I'm sure I would see the same expression on my face as on Matthew's. Holding back the tears, I closed my eyes and saw Violet's innocent, youthful smile. The image of a pure, innocent girl reaching out to Matthew and me with her tiny hands, trying to share happiness, filled me with frustration. Violet was asking for help. Thinking this made us feel incredibly ashamed for not noticing her suffering sooner. Even without seeing her directly, it was clear from her voice on the phone that Violet was severely weakened. I couldn't believe that Violet, who always had a vibrant smile, was now in such a state, calling for help. Looking out the passenger window at the dark town, I thought,
this must be a dream, a bad dream.
Passing through a quiet residential area, the light leaking from each home seemed to carry the laughter of families, reminding me of what Violet and our life should be, which brought more sadness. The journey that usually takes an hour during the day was quicker due to the lack of rush hour traffic, and we soon arrived at the Adams house. Are you okay? If you want, I can go in alone. Matthew spoke kindly, showing concern for me, but this was a problem for our family to face. Preparing for whatever reality awaited us, I resolved. We will definitely save Violet with our own hands. When I rang the doorbell, a carefree voice responded after a pause. Hello? Who is it at this hour? Contrary to the urgent call from Violet, Albert's relaxed and peaceful voice left us puzzled.
It's Smith, Violet's mother.
Upon hearing my name, Albert fell silent, possibly on guard, then slowly asked,
Is there something wrong?
He then cracked the door open slightly, peering out at us standing outside.
I'm sorry for bothering you late at night, Albert. It's urgent, and we need to talk.
Matthew wedged his foot into the slight opening of the door and forcefully pushed it open.
What are you doing, Matthew? We're coming in.
We barged in with a determined attitude, not taking no for an answer. Standing in front of a dimly lit, narrow room at the end of the hallway.
Is Violet in here?
There's no explaining why we thought Violet was in this room, but we instinctively knew she was here, calling out to us for help.
This is outrageous. Even if you are Violet's parents, I'll call the police. Good. That way, the police can witness this too.
Without hesitation, Matthew forcefully slid open the room's door. There, Violet was curled up on the floor, resembling a worn and discarded mop. It took a few seconds for my brain to recognize that it was indeed Violet, so emaciated and altered was her appearance.
Violet! Oh, what has happened to you?
We rushed to Violet, lifting her weakened body in our arms.
Mom, help me! I'm in pain. I can't take it anymore.
Barely speaking between erratic breaths, that's how Violet responded. It was immediately clear that Violet was delirious and suffering from dehydration.
What are you doing here? Leave immediately.
Albert tried to dismiss us as if we were intruders, but his voice lacked any conviction. His gaze wandered as if frightened, and his body trembled.
Albert! Bring some water now! I can't possibly. Don't argue, just do it.
Pressured by my stern shout, Albert ran to the kitchen and quickly returned with a bottle of water from the fridge. I snatched the bottle, opened it. Here, Violet. Drink some water. Alerted by the commotion, Florence and Aurora also appeared.
What is all this noise about? It's so loud I can't hear the TV. We're the ones who need an explanation here.
As Matthew glared at Albert, Albert began to apologize profusely.
I'm so sorry.
Albert then started to explain how Violet ended up in this state, a story beyond our wildest imaginations. It seemed that initially, Violet and Albert had managed well living with Florence. However, at some point, Albert started coming home late, and in response, Florence's attitude towards Violet turned cold. One day, when Violet felt anxious about Albert's late returns, she sought advice from Florence. Instead of addressing her concerns, Florence blamed Violet for Albert's absence. Violet couldn't understand why she was being blamed.
It's because you haven't returned to your pre-pregnancy figure,
Florence told her. Following that, Florence began imposing all household chores on Violet and even restricted her meals. Despite this, Violet remained upbeat, brushing off the unreasonable demands, but it seemed Florence found no amusement in her resilience. The harassment escalated, and under the guise of preventing secret snacking, Florence took control of all Violet's finances. Seeing an opportunity for entertainment, Aurora, the recently divorced sister-in-law, joined in, with Florence assigning her to monitor Violet whenever Florence was away. The hardest part for Violet was being denied the opportunity to care for Kendrick herself. Despite living under the same roof, there was nothing more painful and sad than not being able to raise her own child. Florence forbade Violet from seeing Kendrick and had Aurora stop her whenever she tried to approach his room. While Violet was punished with cleaning duties, Florence spent joyful moments with Kendrick. "This is all I know," Albert said, collapsing to his knees, powerless.
Don't speak of our family's shame so lightly. How could you discuss such trivial matters with strangers?
Albert, you've become so weak.
That's not all, is it? There's more you're hiding, right?
Albert looked up, his face flashing with panic. Just then, a taxi stopped at the entrance and someone alighted.
They've arrived.
The Adams family was confused, unable to grasp the situation. Soon, a slender gentleman in his 50s appeared, causing Albert's face to turn pale.
It seems you recognize this gentleman, don't you?
Albert didn't answer, realizing he was in a situation with no escape. He waited silently, letting time pass.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Watson. I believe this is the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting the Adams family in person.
Kevin Watson introduced himself, looking at each member of the Adams family in turn. In his youth, Kevin Watson was a popular actor known to everyone, starring in movies and dramas. As he aged, his popularity waned, leaving only his name known to the public.
Why is Mr. Kevin Watson at our home?
Florence, representing the Adams family, asked, her smile strained and her voice high-pitched with clear agitation. It was clear to anyone that she was visibly shaken.
It was I who invited Mr. Watson here. Before coming, I contacted a lawyer acquaintance and asked Mr. Watson to join us as well. And what exactly is the relationship between Mr. Watson and us?
Florence attempted to feign ignorance, but I smirked and said,
Don't pretend you don't know anything. You must have some idea why Mr. Watson is here.
The lawyer arrived shortly after, apologizing for his delay.
Sorry for being late. I was organizing some documents for another case, and it took longer than expected.
The arrival of the lawyer silenced the Adams family.
In fact, at Sierra's request, I've been investigating Albert's personal life for the past 6 months. It turns out, Albert has been frequently meeting a certain woman, a wealthy client at the department store where Albert works. And upon investigating this woman, we uncovered a shocking truth. That woman happens to be my wife, Hillary Sanders.
Kevin Watson added in a calm tone to the lawyer's explanation.
When my wife brought up divorce, I was initially surprised, but deep down, I felt, of course. She had been going out secretly for a while. After hearing the details from this lawyer, everything made sense. So, we decided to come here to hear directly from Mr. Albert, the party involved.
Albert slowly stood up, and in a frail voice, as if devoid of spirit, began to tell everything.
My relationship with Hillary started, as mentioned earlier, through her being a major client at the department store and me being the attendant. Over the years of working visits to her home, we developed a relationship. Initially, it was just a fling for me, but then it was revealed Hillary was pregnant, and we realized we couldn't turn back. We discussed leaving our partners to remarry. I'm truly sorry.
At Kevin Watson's feet, filled with indignation, Albert collapsed powerlessly.
When I was a celebrated actor, adored by the public, Hillary would always greet me with her brightest smile. But now that my work has dwindled, meeting a handsome man like you must have been irresistible for her. She's the type who must have everything she likes.
Kevin Watson said with a weary smile. Albert, who wanted a divorce from Violet, was in a bind because filing for divorce while having an affair would lead to a hefty compensation claim against him. So, he turned to Florence for help. Initially, Florence resisted the idea of divorce due to how it would look but changed her tune completely upon learning the other woman was wealthy. Thinking there would be no need to pay compensation if Violet, the daughter-in-law, initiated the divorce, Florence began to torment her relentlessly, hoping to drive her out of the house.
I believed you, but you...
Violet, staggering yet standing firm on her feet, expressed her frustration loudly, tears streaming down her face.
I believed that if I lost weight, Albert would return to me. That's why I endured all the unreasonable demands from Florence and Aurora. To think it was all a scheme to drive me out.
It's okay. You've done nothing wrong. You don't have to push yourself anymore. I embraced Violet tightly. I did want to divorce Violet, that's true. But I never imagined Mom and Aurora could be this cruel to her. I'm utterly disillusioned.
Wait just a minute. I was only trying to help you by getting Violet out of this house. It's your fault for having an affair in the first place.
That's right. Albert, you've been silently condoning what we've been doing. Don't act like you were oblivious to it all now. As the three of them argued, I was speechless, but Violet, trembling with anger, shouted,
Enough! If you so desperately wanted me out of here, I'll leave on my own.
Oh, that would be a relief.
You're mistaken to be pleased, Florence. I will never forgive you. Once we're divorced, I will indeed demand a substantial amount in compensation, just so you know.
With that, Violet called out with a voice that echoed through the house.
Kendrick! Where are you? Come here, we're going to live with Mom and Grandpa and Grandma from now on.
Okay, coming. Kendrick cheerfully ran down the stairs and hugged Violet. Subsequently, Albert, exposed for his affair with a client, was dismissed from his company for severely damaging the corporate image. Following her declaration, Violet filed for divorce and sued Albert for a significant amount in compensation. After losing his job and being ordered to pay compensation for the divorce, Albert, following a major argument with Florence and Aurora, was forced to reluctantly sell the house. Violet's anger did not subside with this. She also demanded substantial compensation from Florence and Aurora for the mental and physical distress they caused her. Despite the harassment from Florence and Aurora, Violet had meticulously documented the daily events in a notebook, which proved advantageous in court. Returning to her parents' home, Violet gradually healed both mentally and physically, reverting to her cheerful self. There were ongoing issues with the Addams family, but with the help of a skilled lawyer, everything was resolved. I heard through the grapevine that Albert and Hillary had a child. After losing his job and the house, Albert, supported by Hillary's wealth but devoid of the will to work, grew increasingly unkempt. Moreover, with the elderly Florence and the nagging Aurora joining them, Hillary, raised in luxury, could not stand it and eventually left with the child. What became of the Addams family after Hillary left is neither within my knowledge nor my interest.
Well, I've slacked off enough. Time to get to work.
With renewed determination, Violet started helping out at the store, taking over for me as I struggled with back pain. Having worked in customer service at a major department store, Violet's reputation quickly made our shop a local sensation, drawing long lines of customers. With our new promotional model in place, I have no regrets. I stepped back from the storefront, spending my free time watching over Kendrick as much as possible. Kendrick, soon to be a middle schooler, declared at his elementary school graduation, "I want to be a cool chef like Grandpa." His proclamation brought Matthew and me to tears. We are now eagerly looking forward to his future.
Hello. Hope we're not disturbing.
Suddenly, the living room door opened, and in came my husband's colleague, Miller. Following him, about 4 others entered one after another, with my husband, Kevin, trailing behind them with a crude smile.
Sorry, but what's going on here? Today's a barbecue with friends. Hurry up and buy some meat and beer.
Kevin, who had established a habit of talking down to me, said this to me. It seems like birds of a feather flocked together, as Kevin's friends were also directing crude smiles our way. I was furious.
I'm actually about to go on a trip, so that's not possible. What?
Kevin's face filled with anger, as if embarrassed in front of his friends. Normally, I would panic and comply upon seeing that look on his face, but now, completely out of patience, I couldn't care less about Kevin's mood.
Just make sure you're careful with fire, okay? Hey!
I ignored them all and left the house. However, a few hours later, I received a call while on my trip that my husband had been taken into police custody. What on earth did he do? My name is Isabella. I'm a 48-year-old civil servant. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. I live in the house they left me, and I graduated college with the help of insurance money and scholarships. I was lucky enough to become a civil servant, and though living alone was lonely, it was stable. The administration I worked for was far from the house I lived in, so I rented out the house I lived in with my parents and rented a studio near my workplace for myself. I rented out the house as is, but it quickly found a tenant because of its good location. The person who rented the house was very kind, and knowing my circumstances, told me I could come over any time. Thanks to the rental income and my civil servant salary, I was living a more stable life than others my age. Around that time, visiting tourist spots became my hobby. There's a unique atmosphere everywhere, somehow reassuring yet making me tense, and I loved it. I met my husband, Kevin, at a book club for working adults that a friend invited me to. I was instantly drawn to the quiet and kind Kevin. Perhaps sensing that, Kevin actively pursued me, leading the way in our relationship, which was difficult for me to navigate. After dating for 2 years, he proposed on my 29th birthday, and we got married. The following year, our daughter, Evelyn, was born, and we were very happy. However, that's when Kevin's true nature began to show. Since I was working, we had agreed to share household chores. Kevin had kept to this agreement until I went on maternity leave, but as soon as I started my leave, he began going out to drink more often and completely stopped doing any household chores as soon as I took parental leave.
Hey, the dishes are your job, right?
Please.
What? You've been lazing around all day at home and you're giving orders? You should do it,
Kevin said, and quickly prepared to go out. After Evelyn was born, he would go out to drink about 4 times a week on his own, not caring at all for Evelyn. Juggling childcare and household chores while suffering from sleep deprivation due to night feedings was extremely hard. But complaining to Kevin didn't help. He didn't understand at all and would insult me by saying I was inefficient. Continuing this life made my love for Kevin fade, and by the time Evelyn was 5, I saw him merely as a roommate. Fortunately, I didn't have to work overtime or on weekends and holidays. This allowed me to spend a lot of time with Evelyn. Although Evelyn was a handful with her night crying and frequent feedings as a baby, by the age of 6, she had become a very mature child. She was clingy when it was just the 2 of us, but she also took the initiative to help around the house and always said thank you for each little thing. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that watching Evelyn grow was my only joy, and I adored her. However, Kevin was not involved with Evelyn, only occasionally approaching her when he was in a good mood. By then, his true colors were fully shown, not doing household chores, not participating in child-rearing, and going out to drink almost daily, coming home smelling of women's perfume. But I had grown so indifferent to Kevin that I didn't care anymore. Even so, the reason I didn't choose divorce was to not make life difficult for Evelyn. Honestly, with the rental income from my parents' house and my salary, I could easily afford to send her to college. But I didn't want to burden Evelyn if I became unable to work. Fortunately, Kevin seemed to be competent at his job, and even though it was a small to mid-size company, he earned more than I did. Thus, I had come to view him as the person who would earn the money for Evelyn's education and our living expenses. However, around the time Evelyn entered high school, Kevin's spending got worse. I had always let him spend freely on anything other than Evelyn's tuition and living expenses, but then the school contacted me saying the tuition payment had not gone through. I hurriedly transferred the money from my own account to avoid trouble, but this made me realize there was no benefit to staying married and not divorcing. Thinking this, I approached Kevin, who was about to go out and was looking at himself in the mirror in the bathroom.
Hey, the school called saying Evelyn's tuition payment didn't go through.
Huh, so?
So?
What do you mean so?
You were supposed to pay for it. That kid has been kind of rude lately. Always glaring at me. That's because she's going through adolescence, isn't it?
I felt a headache coming on. Kevin himself must have gone through a rebellious phase. Yet he refuses to take an interest in his own daughter's growth and uses her being rebellious as an excuse not to pay for her tuition, which is just the lowest, not just as a dad but as a person. At this moment, I decided to divorce Kevin once Evelyn started college. And until then, I resolved to act like a compliant wife. As I was thinking this, Kevin looked at me with a smug smile.
What? You know, I hardly ever come home, and do I really need to contribute to the living expenses? So, how about this? I'll pay for that kid's school fees instead of giving you living expenses.
Fine. My recently made resolution was already being tested, but I managed to hold firm. Not contributing to the living expenses was unthinkable. But not having Evelyn's tuition paid would be a bigger problem, so I reluctantly agreed. And the money that used to go to living expenses now became Kevin's pocket money, making his lifestyle even more extravagant. One day, as I was walking through the entertainment district on my way home from work, I spotted Kevin with his arm wrapped around the shoulder of a man I recognized. Kevin hadn't noticed me, but the man next to him did and came over. "If it isn't Isabella. What are you doing here?"
Well,
I think I met him at our wedding, but he wasn't introduced, so I didn't know his name. And despite the distance, he already smelled strongly of alcohol. How long had they been drinking? I managed to suppress my urge to grimace and put on a smile.
"Oh, I'm Miller. Kevin and I were in the same club at college. By the way, Isabella, you're really beautiful. How about one night with me?" "Just kidding."
Hey. If you want a middle-aged woman like this, I'll give her to you. More than Miller's frivolous words, I was shocked by Kevin's words. Even if he was drunk, those were not words to be uttered in front of his wife.
"Really? Maybe I'll book a hotel next time then."
"I'll pass. I'm in a hurry, so I'll be going." A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly left the scene. I could hear Miller and Kevin saying something behind me, but I ignored it all. That night, Kevin, who seemed to have come home in the middle of the night, didn't even remember seeing me the next morning. When I asked about Miller, Kevin bragged about how he had started some profitable business recently and that he had gone to hear about it yesterday.
"Don't come begging for money when I become rich, okay?"
I responded lightly to his buoyant words. As long as Evelyn's tuition was paid, I had no expectations from Kevin anymore. However, a decisive incident would occur a little after Evelyn started college. It happened on the day I was planning to take a solo trip, intending to use up my accumulated paid leave. After gathering everything at the entrance, I took a break. Kevin had left in a happy mood that morning, so I had sent him a message just in case. He had read it, so I felt I had done my duty, and I sipped my tea. Then there was a sound from the entrance, and I thought Kevin had come back unusually early, but the person who came through the door made me almost spit out my tea.
"Hello. Hope we're not disturbing."
Suddenly, Miller walked in through the living room door, followed by about 4 others.
Sorry, what's going on here?" I'm having a barbecue with some friends. Hurry up and buy some meat and beer.
Just like Kevin, who was laughing, his friends were also giving me crude smiles. I was furious.
I'm about to go on a trip, so that's not possible.
What? Kevin's face filled with anger as if he was embarrassed in front of his friends. Normally, I would have panicked and complied upon seeing his face, but now, completely fed up, I had no interest in Kevin's mood.
Just be careful with fire, okay? Hey!
I ignored them all and left the house. However, a few hours later, I received a call while on my trip that my husband had been taken into police custody. What on earth did he do? The call from the police was for identification, and they said I didn't need to come to the station right away. Apparently, they asked Kevin if he could prepare clothes for staying in the detention center because the interrogation might take a while, and he gave them my name and contact details.
We could lend some and bill you later.
Oh, that's fine. Please make him pay for it.
Understood. We'll contact you if there's anything else.
Yes, please do. It seems the reason for being taken into police custody was attempting to forcibly bring a woman who was walking outside while drunk into his home. It was a red-handed arrest, and there was no room for excuses, and he would likely be charged. Miller was facing other charges, and there was a possibility that Kevin was involved as well. Hearing that, I sat down on the spot. It was good that I had arrived at my destination. I cried. Then, coffee was placed on the table in front of me.
Mom, are you okay? What happened?
Actually, the place I was traveling to was the area where Evelyn's university is located, and I was going to stay at Evelyn's place during my trip. The call from the police came just as I was about to take a break after arriving at Evelyn's place.
Dad's been arrested by the police. The reason is a bit.
It's okay. Tell me when you've calmed down. Hey, Mom, maybe you should seriously consider divorce. You've been enduring for my sake, right? I ranked first in my class this time. I got a scholarship with no repayment obligation, my professor told me. So, I'll be fine.
Evelyn. You're right.
Evelyn's words made up my mind. As a parent, I felt unreliable for making my daughter say this, but at the same time, I was very happy that Evelyn had grown up to be so kind and splendid. A few days later, I received a call from the police that only Kevin had been released. It seemed Kevin claimed to be a victim, unaware that Miller's business involved criminal activity. In fact, it was proven that Kevin knew nothing, and he was declared innocent, which disappointed me internally. The day after the police contacted me, Kevin called me. I didn't want to answer the phone, but thinking about what comes next, I decided to answer.
Hello? Ah, you picked up. Where the hell are you?
At Evelyn's place. When I said that, Kevin seemed to think for a moment. But eventually, he didn't come up with an answer and quickly raised his voice.
I don't know where that kid lives. Just come back home. The housework is piling up.
Sorry, but I'm not coming back.
What?
My firm refusal seemed to surprise Kevin, and he was momentarily speechless. I repeated slowly to the silence on the other end of the phone. I'm not coming back. Please, let's get a divorce.
Do you even know what you're saying?
Kevin managed to squeeze out some words. I didn't respond to him. Then, simultaneously, I heard the sound of a mobile phone being dropped on the other end. He must have been quite shocked. I delivered the final blow.
Let's discuss the rest through a lawyer. I'll have my lawyer contact you later. Wait, hey! Isabella!
Kevin was calling my name, but I hung up without a care. Then, I contacted the lawyer I had just hired yesterday. It seemed the lawyer had reached out to Kevin immediately, as I received multiple calls from Kevin, all of which I ignored. I then contacted my workplace. I had already been considering early retirement, but I took this as an opportunity to resign and decided to live near Evelyn. Fortunately, I had an inheritance left by my parents and a steady income from renting out my family home. Additionally, I would receive a severance package, so living on my own wouldn't be an issue. Since it would take about 2 months to finalize my resignation, I rented a short-term apartment near my workplace to wrap up my job. I commuted from there and completed the handovers and other work. During this time, Kevin called me multiple times, but I had my lawyer handle all communications. Kevin was adamant about not wanting a divorce, and despite hearing how much he had hurt me,
I didn't do it. It's all a misunderstanding,
he kept insisting. Reluctantly, I agreed to a meeting. It was challenging to even set a date, but 3 weeks after proposing the meeting, we finally scheduled it, and I prepared myself for a major confrontation. On the day of the meeting, the person who showed up at the meeting place was a completely sullen middle-aged man.
I'm not going to divorce. I was just deceived. I'm not at fault. Let's sit down and talk about it.
I responded dispassionately to Kevin's remarks and entered the restaurant ahead of him. The high-end restaurant, designed with separate rooms for each table, was where Kevin and I had celebrated our engagement with a meal.
Do you remember this place?
Huh? Kevin's response extinguished the last bit of sentiment I had left. Even after everything, we were once committed to spending a lifetime together. I had hoped that remembering this place might lead to a more amicable discussion, but my consideration was in vain. Let's start the discussion. At my cue, the lawyer beside me took out several documents. They contained evidence of Kevin's actions and infidelity, as well as details about the dubious business he was involved in with Miller. Kevin looked over them with annoyance, then sighed.
If you have complaints, say them directly. Sneaky woman.
These are not complaints, but facts needed for our discussion. Kevin seemed to become even more irritated upon hearing this. Still, I was unwavering. However, when a new document was presented, Kevin's complexion changed.
Hey, this is...
Oh, didn't you know? The document included a photo of a woman in a wedding dress and her husband, smiling happily. Kevin paled at the sight of the two. The woman you're currently having an affair with, she's your boss's wife, right?
No way!
Kevin, apparently unaware, looked utterly panicked. His earlier defiance had vanished, replaced by sheer panic. Investigations revealed that Kevin had been involved with the affair partner for about 3 years, considering divorcing me and marrying her until their communication recently became sporadic. She had married Kevin's boss before meeting Kevin. Apparently, it was a shotgun wedding. They had just taken their 10th anniversary wedding photos. Of course, the evidence was sent to Kevin's company, and it was scheduled to be delivered to Kevin's boss today. The affair partner would also be receiving a certified mail by now.
Speak of the devil.
At that moment, Kevin's phone, placed on the table, rang, displaying his boss's name. Kevin didn't answer, so I tapped to take the call and put it on speaker. A furious shout, loud enough to break windows, erupted from the phone.
You've been betraying me? Having an affair with my wife during work hours is a betrayal to the company as well. Don't expect to stay comfortably at the company from tomorrow.
I'm sorry. Kevin's apology was pitiful, with none of the charm he once had. I pushed the divorce papers towards him, tapping on the name field twice.
So, will you sign the divorce papers for now? No.
With the prospect of remarrying his affair partner gone, Kevin stubbornly refused to divorce. I called out towards the door, seemingly in a quandary. Says he. This is a problem. What should we do? Is someone there? Kevin asked, fearfully looking towards me as I gestured with my eyes towards the door. As he reluctantly looked at the door, which then opened to reveal someone, Kevin's face turned pale, and he began to tremble. Dad, Mom, why are you here? Standing there were the in-laws. Kevin wasn't on good terms with the in-laws' house, and after we got married, he forbade me from interacting with the in-laws. So, for Kevin, the last people he expected to see here were present. My mother-in-law briefly greeted me before walking up to Kevin with a raised hand, delivering a sharp slap that left his face red. With a face even redder than Kevin's, my mother-in-law started shouting. How could you? You have a wonderful wife like Isabella and you cheat? What have you done? Wait, Mom, you and Isabella haven't seen each other since we got married. How would you know she's wonderful? Before I could answer Kevin's reasonable question, my father-in-law spoke up. Isabella has been sending us letters every month, showing us how Evelyn is growing up. Recently, she and Evelyn even came to visit us a few times. You, who haven't contacted us even once since getting married, don't deserve such a good person. Hey! Didn't I tell you not to contact them? Why are you going behind my back? Kevin turned away from my father-in-law and yelled at me. In reality, the in-laws' house is a farmhouse, where Kevin's brother and his wife live together. Kevin, who inexplicably despised this arrangement, would constantly criticize and make snide remarks towards his brother's wife, resulting in him being kicked out after graduating college. When I learned from the in-laws and Kevin's brother's family that Kevin forbade me from talking to them because he feared his misdeeds would be exposed, I felt dizzy from my poor judgment in men. When I sent the greeting letters, they would kindly call me back. That's how we secretly continued our relationship. You were deceiving me? Who I associate with is none of your business. I don't want to hear it from a man who repeatedly cheats and gets involved in shady dealings. As I retorted, Kevin was visibly frustrated. Suddenly, he defiantly signed the divorce papers. Seems like you went through a lot of trouble. Fine, I'll divorce you, but don't expect to get any money or the house from me. What are you talking about? You won't be dividing anything. Everything will go to Isabella. My mother-in-law interjected, nudging Kevin, who was overwhelmed by her. I watched him coldly before storing the divorce papers in my bag and leaving the restaurant with my lawyer. Afterward, I went to the municipal office to submit the divorce papers. Though it happened quicker than I thought, my heart felt incredibly calm. Kevin was fired from his small company after being accused of having an affair with his boss's wife and engaging in infidelity during work hours. Having handed over the house and money to me, he was left with nothing. Eventually, the in-laws took him back to their house temporarily before sending him off to a distant relative's place. Kevin's brother's wife, not having forgiven his past actions, refused to even let Kevin into the house. Actually, her daughter, who got married last year and is soon due for delivery, was coming home soon. It being summer, Kevin spent a night in a small shed on the property before being taken away early in the morning by the relative. The affair partner and her husband, Kevin's boss, although they didn't divorce, were forced to live with the boss's parents under constant surveillance and endured endless taunts and harassment from her mother-in-law. Kevin once escaped to see the affair partner, but she was just playing with him, and upon seeing him, she demanded, "Give me some money to escape." My mother-in-law learned through relatives that Kevin was devastated by this. Kevin returned to the relative's house, shocked. Now, Kevin works non-stop, and even on his rare days off, he can't go out satisfactorily due to the relative's surveillance. I continue to maintain a relationship with the in-laws as Evelyn's grandparents. My brother-in-law's family are great people, and we enjoy meals together during events, and I feel like I have gained a new family. Evelyn was a bit upset about being left out, but was very happy about the divorce. Now living nearby, we go out together twice a week. As for me, having moved to a region with many tourist spots, I'm immersing myself in hobbies at leisure. Owning 2 houses in the city center and renting them out, I can cover my living expenses with the rental income alone. So, the severance pay, remaining insurance money, and the settlement from Kevin's divorce are freely used for Evelyn's college expenses, my hobbies, and travel. I often think I should have divorced sooner, enjoying such a leisurely life.
Well, shall we go?
Holding the plane ticket Evelyn gave me for my birthday, I set off on a trip.
Help! Actually, my parents.
Yesterday, I was hit by a car driven by my MIL, Lorene, and was rushed to the hospital. After the surgery, while I was resting, my husband called me.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you got scared by the car and fell, and now today, Mom is saying she hit you.
Summarizing my husband's excited rambling, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, my FIL Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain yourself that you just fell.
These were the first words he spoke to me after I was rushed to the emergency. My anger reached its limit, and I decided to take revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do as they wish, but not anymore. That's when it hit me. Yes, this will surely prove that Lorene hit me. With my body still in pain, I reached for my smartphone again. My name is Alicia, 50 years old. Since getting married, I've been a housewife. I met my husband Colt in my 20s, in a typical office romance. He was assigned to take care of me when I joined as a new graduate. Even back then, my husband wasn't particularly handsome, nor did he have traits that were attractive to women. Of course, at that time, I didn't have any romantic feelings for him. I never once considered him in a romantic way, just diligently followed his orders every day. However, after working together for a while, he took a liking to me. He must have been happy to have a subordinate close in age, but gradually I realized it was more than that. Initially, I wasn't keen, but being flattered every day made me feel better. Thinking about it calmly, I don't know what he liked about me. But I got carried away by his sweet talk, and we ended up dating. Though we worked together for a while, about a year later, he proposed. I had no particular reason to refuse, so I accepted his proposal. Convincing myself that this was just how things are, I started a new life. Upon his insistence, I quit my job to become a housewife and, without any say, started living with his parents. I had visited my in-laws a few times after getting married, but never imagined I'd be living with them. When we met, they both welcomed me warmly, making me think there was nothing to worry about. By the time I realized, Larry had retired, and I was left alone with my in-laws while my husband was at work. There was hardly any sweet newlywed life, far from the marriage I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but gradually their attitude towards me changed. Lorene's demands grew day by day, and the stress was crushing me.
Because of Colt, you get to be a housewife, so you should at least be perfect at household chores, right?
Every time something didn't please her, Lorene would scold me with delight. She never doubted that educating a bad daughter-in-law was her mission, as if it gave her life meaning. Lorene herself had lived with her mother-in-law.
I remember when
I got tired of hearing her old stories. Times and values have changed since then. Being forced to accept such mindsets was nothing but annoying. Yet, due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her nagging. Lorene would go out to karaoke with friends of her age a few times a week, and it seems they would enjoy talking badly about their daughters-in-law. Strangely, my daughter-in-law is so competent. Is not what they brag about, but rather, such a terrible daughter-in-law, is what they take pride in discussing. Hearing such stories, I wondered if I would end up like them someday, which made me feel gloomy. As for Larry, he wasn't on my side either. Though he didn't antagonize me as much as Lorene, he complained about my cooking almost every day. Today's seasoning is especially strong. Are you serving such unhealthy food because you wish the elderly would just disappear? He feels like an outdated man from a bygone era, clearly looking down on women. He often says things like women should be a certain way, suggesting women need to be more considerate and help without being asked. It's embarrassing just listening to him, laying out his idealistic views. Thinking he can remain the same and act all high and mighty no matter his age. Larry seems more about boasting his views to me rather than harassing me, proud of his own thoughts. He'll never realize his mistakes and will just grow older in this manner. Just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've talked to my husband about them numerous times, but he always gives vague responses. Moreover, as our marriage has progressed, he's begun to criticize me for speaking up. You should be kinder to dad and mom since they're old. Isn't that a wife's duty? Like father, like son. Following in his parents' footsteps, my husband has also started to take me for granted and look down on me. He does nothing to help around the house when he comes back, just sits there as if it's the norm. Having children might have changed things, but we were unable to have any. We tried fertility treatments until our late 30s, but it never happened. Right after we got married. When will I see my grandchild's face? Lorene would pressure me almost daily, asking. It's not solely my fault, and children are a blessing. Creating children just for the in-laws is absurd. I thought there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who helped me. A couple living across the street. The husband, Dawson, and his wife, Bethany, lived together without children. Dawson's mother struggled living with her mother-in-law and decided he didn't want to cause such trouble. Bethany was there for me during my struggles with infertility and would listen to my complaints about my in-laws. Since my in-laws and husband have a good public image, Bethany was surprised at first. I thought your husband was a good man, but to see he still hasn't cut the apron strings at this age, honestly, it's a bit off-putting. Thanks to Bethany, I've been able to live through this life without feeling too burdened. Lorene, now over 75, still drives herself around. It's precarious to watch, and despite my warnings to my husband, he doesn't listen. When I suggest she should give up her license. Are you making fun of Mom? He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I've tried hinting at it to Lorene, but she seems to think she's still quite young. Are you treating me like an old woman? How unpleasant. And she, like my husband, gets furious. I've been worried something serious might happen, and that day came in an unexpected way. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket for groceries. Walking is mostly my mode of transportation since I don't have a driver's license. I thought I'd get it after starting work, but I got married sooner than expected. When I consulted my husband, "You don't need one since I'll drive." He opposed the idea of me getting a license. On sale days, the bags are inevitably heavy, but asking my husband or Lorene for a ride is out of the question. My husband, who once happily offered rides, now just clicks his tongue in denial. Carrying heavy bags, I returned home when I noticed the garage door was open.
Did she say she was going out today?
Lorene hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, it doesn't matter, I thought, as I passed by the garage heading towards the entrance. That's when it happened. With a roaring engine, a car sped out of the garage. Such a foolish word slipped out in surprise. The next moment, the car, without slowing down, crashed into me. The impact sent me flying backward, groceries spilling from my bags. Lying there, I was slammed onto the asphalt ground. Unable to grasp what had happened, a severe pain assaulted the back of my head where it hit the ground. Trying to get up was futile. My body wouldn't listen, and all I could do was stare at the sky. How much time had passed? Before I knew it, Bethany was peering down at me.
Hang in there! I've called an ambulance. It's going to be okay.
Bethany's face, as she spoke to me, was pale and strained. Had things really become so serious? That was the naive question that crossed my mind. Moving my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing that, I gradually began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of the situation. But there was nothing I could do, as my body remained immobile. Eventually, I could hear the ambulance approaching, little by little.
Just a bit more. It's almost here. Hang on.
Bethany urged me desperately, as my head started to feel foggy.
No. Just a little longer.
Contrary to Bethany's words, I closed my eyes. When I next opened them, I was lying in a hospital bed. An 4 tube was attached to my hand, and I could see the fluid dripping without pause. Realizing I had been saved, tears naturally started to flow. Moving my head even slightly caused intense pain. Given the amount of blood I had lost, it was no wonder it hurt. Moaning on the bed, a nurse hurried over.
You shouldn't move your head yet.
There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I silently listened to the nurse's explanation. According to her, a day had passed since the accident. I had been rushed to the hospital by the ambulance team called by Bethany. I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and was saved. Bethany had stayed with me all this time, and now, outside visiting hours, she had gone home. It seems she had also contacted my husband, but after conveying the surgery's success, that was it. My whole body ached, but there was no life-threatening danger, and I was told to rest for a while. Even so, I didn't want to do anything for the time being. There were many things I needed to think about, but I closed my eyes anyway. Soon after, my phone beside the bed kept ringing. I didn't want to answer it, so I left it, but the persistent calls continued. After ignoring it several times, it didn't seem like it would stop. Careful not to move my head, I groped for my phone and saw Colt's name on the screen. Feeling a bit relieved that he might actually be worried, I answered the phone.
Help! Actually, my parents.
My husband started speaking without letting me say a word.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you were startled by the car and fell. And now today, there's a testimony that Mom hit you.
Summarizing my husband's excited rant, it seemed both my in-laws had been taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was indeed hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, my FIL Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while.
The car, fortunately, wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt, but Mom twisted her neck a bit from the collision with you. And yet, it's unfair how the police are being one-sided.
Unaware of my astonishment, He was worried about the car and his parents. How rotten can this family be? Since answering the phone, had he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents being taken to the police, even going so far as to ask me, the victim, to prove their innocence.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that you just fell.
The number you have dialed is currently. Although my husband had been talking nonstop since the call connected, he was surprised by the first words I finally spoke.
Eh?
I then immediately hung up the phone. Afterward, calls from my husband continued for a while, but frustrated, I set my phone to reject his calls. Later, I found out that, just as my husband had said on the phone, my in-laws were taken to the police station. After a while, my husband himself was also taken to the police station where his parents were waiting. The entire episode was witnessed by Bethany, who lives across the street. Initially, it was Bethany who reported Lorene's crime to the police. After riding in the ambulance with me and taking care of various procedures in place of my husband, she was questioned by the police about the accident. It seems she was questioned after the in-laws had been, making her testimony somewhat of a corroboration. Bethany noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out the window, she saw me lying on the road. She then hurriedly called an ambulance and rushed outside. By then, Lorene's car was nowhere to be seen, and she didn't understand what had happened. More than figuring out the cause, she was concerned for my well-being. Bethany told the police everything as it was. However, the in-laws immediately denied any police suggestions that I might have been hit by a car. Feeling something was off, Bethany pondered for a while even after the police officer had left. After seeing my surgery through, she went home and discussed it with her husband, Dawson. Then, Dawson came up with an unexpected solution. The dash cam, it records 24/7. The scene should be right in front of the car, so it must have captured everything. Together, they checked the camera installed in their car. Just as I thought. As Dawson predicted, the moment of the accident was recorded. There, unmistakably, was the moment Lorene hit me with her car. After I fell, Larry's face appeared from the car window, but then the car drove off quickly. A clear hit and run. With the footage of the in-laws' crime in hand, the two went to the police station. And they proved that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. Upon receiving testimony from Bethany and others, the police immediately began questioning the in-laws. Despite the video evidence, the in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt.
That video is fabricated. Someone is trying to frame me. Officer, please, you can't put an old woman in jail, can you?
Both Lorene and Larry were embarrassingly defiant. Eventually, Lorene admitted to the crime, saying, "My son told me to hide it." Indeed, my husband had instructed them to coordinate their stories. But to think Lorene would betray her own son to save herself was beyond belief. Worn out from the interrogation, Larry confessed that although he was in the passenger seat, they fled, abandoning me. Upon their confessions, the police questioned my husband, who was also reluctant to admit his involvement. Then, a detective came to my hospital room. Your parents both claim they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. Initially, they lied extensively, but this seems to be the truth. The detective proceeded with the conversation apologetically, considering my feelings. The car showed no significant damage or dents. If my husband had worried about damage to the car and had it repaired, that would constitute evidence tampering. However, my husband must have decided calmly that it wasn't necessary. Since then, I've had no desire to see my husband, who hasn't shown his face at all. I mentioned to the detective about the call from my husband during the in-laws' questioning. He had admitted to instructing his parents to align their stories. Hearing this, the detective sighed deeply.
I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel.
The detective seemed to sympathize with me, having been betrayed by my family on top of suffering a serious injury. After a painful silence, the detective left the room. A few days later, as I was about to be discharged, the police contacted me again. Bethany, who came to pick me up from the hospital in place of my husband, drove me straight to the police station. There, the detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard the story from Bethany, and he led us together to a room. Inside, there were my haggard husband and in-laws. Alicia. As I entered the room guided by the detective, Lorene suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was pretentious, but it seemed she was genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or relieved to see me alive, I couldn't tell. We were shown to our seats and waited until Lorene had calmed down. We waited until Lorene regained her composure, comforted by a female officer. Finally calm enough to speak, Lorene, sitting next to Larry, who looked utterly exhausted, kept repeating, "I'm sorry." The specific agenda for the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim, involved. A screen was prepared, displaying the footage of the accident submitted by Bethany. As we watched, the detective progressed the conversation step by step. The in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, affirming the accuracy. The problem was whether my husband was involved. After hearing my story, his call history proved he had phoned me. Yet, he still claimed no recollection of instructing his parents, steadfastly denying his involvement. I hadn't recorded our conversation, so progress was difficult. "You just want to bring me down too, you liar," my husband exclaimed at one point, becoming emotional despite the detective's attempts to calm him.
Please stop. Lying further will only lead to your regret. Do you really want to betray your mom and dad just to save yourself?
Lorene advised, but he wouldn't accept it. Feeling stuck, the detective intervened.
So, you're saying your parents provided false testimony to the police?
His words had a different weight than mine, silencing my husband.
Your mother running you over is clearly captured in the footage, acknowledged by both of your parents. But according to you, your parents are attempting to lessen their guilt by implicating you as a co-conspirator.
The gravity of the detective's words made my husband's face contort.
Do you understand? Your parents' crime becomes even more severe.
He continued, leading my husband to finally admit his guilt. In the end, I must have realized the gravity of what was happening. The confession of my husband laid bare the crimes of all three. This prompted the police officers waiting in the room to start moving hurriedly.
Regarding that,
now, a detective addressed me, questioning whether I would withdraw the complaint. The crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, but this could significantly change their fate. However, I firmly refused.
Though I was unharmed, fleeing right after the accident is inexcusable. I will file a complaint to ensure they are held accountable for their actions.
My decision caused a great stir among the three. Lorene cried out loud, and both Larry and my husband hung their heads in shame right there. They probably hadn't expected me to make such a ruthless decision. Each of them had never doubted they were a good husband, a good Lorene, and a good Larry. It seemed they had taken my forgiveness for granted. If the family had handled the aftermath of the accident properly, I wouldn't have gone this far. But my in-laws decided to sacrifice my life to protect themselves. My husband chose to prioritize his parents' and social appearance over his wife's life. I wanted them to reflect on the severity of their actions and properly atone for their sins. Silently, I stood up and left the room. Accompanied by Bethany, I began the various procedures in another room. These were my in-laws and husband I had lived with for years. It would be a lie to say my heart wasn't aching. Above all, I was the one who was hurt the most. Even though my physical wounds had healed, this trauma would follow me for life. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I couldn't feel completely relieved. By the time I left the police station, the day had completely darkened. Bethany, considering my feelings, invited me to a dinner party as a celebration of my discharge. Grateful for my friend's thoughtfulness, I headed to Bethany's house. Warmly welcomed by Bethany and Dawson, we enjoyed a meal together. There, I laughed for the first time in a while. Both of them, while being considerate, treated me as usual. Even though the in-laws and husband who looked down on me were gone, I was now on my own. There were still legal proceedings and many things to do. Just thinking about it made me feel disheartened. But for that moment, I forgot all about it and truly enjoyed myself. After a delightful night, I decided to divorce my husband. There was no need to torment myself any further. It seemed he had learned a little from this incident, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately signed the divorce papers and broached the subject of divorce with my husband. He initially seemed surprised at the divorce papers, but soon consented as if he understood. Unable to bear seeing my husband's pitiful state any longer, I left everything to my lawyer thereafter. The three faced criminal charges, and in addition, were ordered to pay me compensation in the divorce proceedings. Since the fault was on my husband, I received even more compensation from the divorce. Determined to leave my in-laws' house, I rented an apartment with the compensation from the divorce proceedings. I planned to start anew far away, but I decided to stay in the city I was familiar with. The reason I didn't move far away was because Bethany's husband, Dawson, ran a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Bethany was also helping with the work, and I thought it would be good to try it together. Although I had been invited several times before, I had given up due to what my in-laws and husband might say. Honestly, with the compensation from the divorce proceedings, I didn't need to work. But Bethany and Dawson were concerned about my well-being. Suddenly being alone, they gave me a purpose in life. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with a friend was very enjoyable. I was confused by all the new experiences, but they became a significant source of fulfillment for me. Thus, I embarked on a new life, and even more encounters awaited me. I ended up remarrying a man I met through work. I had told him about the divorce, but kept silent about the compensation until we got married. Yet, he didn't blame me. "It's natural to be cautious after going through so much," he said with a smile. Past midlife, my life took a significant turn. I am probably happier and more fulfilled now than when I was younger. Despite being betrayed and hurt by those I had trusted for years, I grasped a greater happiness. Grateful to the friend and her husband who always extended their hands to me, I now step into a brighter future. But Catherine has her own room. It's been 6 months since I started living with Catherine, my step-granddaughter. I often saw Catherine doing her homework in the bathroom. Feeling a distance between us, our daily conversations were scarce, and I spent many days troubled. Even asking daughter-in-law Ava, I was curtly told it's because the bathroom helps her concentrate, leaving me puzzled. With my son, Taylor, and the others frequently abroad for work, they were hardly ever home. It's practically just Catherine and me living together. Wanting to get closer to Catherine, I started off with safe conversations. "Is school fun?" "It's okay." "Which class do you like best?" "They're all the same." Her monotone responses left me at a loss for what to ask next. It was unusual for conversation to falter to this extent, even considering her shy nature. Just as I began to feel anxious about our lack of closeness, Taylor and the others were away on what seemed like their umpteenth business trip of the year. It was as if she was waiting for us to be alone. Catherine looked me in the eyes, almost pleadingly, and began to speak.
Grandma, can I talk to you for a sec? What's wrong?
Actually. Catherine, suggesting it's faster to show than tell, took my hand and led me to Ava's room. Upon entering, she opened one of the many piled-up cardboard boxes to show me something. This winter was feeling particularly cold. On my way home from shopping, carrying bags, I walked slowly, shivering from the cold. Perhaps it's because it's nearly Christmas, but the streets are busier and filled with smiling faces. I feel lonely. This year, at 64, I, Harper, recently lost my beloved husband Martin in an accident, feeling an overwhelming loneliness. Until last year, I enjoyed Christmas with Martin, laughing like everyone passing by, but now I'm alone. Even though I didn't buy much, the bags felt unusually heavy, and I hurried home.
I'm home. Oh yeah, I forgot. There's no one here.
My words disappeared into the air. Mechanically, I stored the groceries I had bought. Suddenly, I realized that I hadn't cooked much since Martin's passing.
Maybe I'll make beef stew today.
Muttering to myself, the house phone rang. I rushed to pick it up.
Hello?
Hey, it's Taylor. The caller was my only son, Taylor. Your dad's funeral is over. Of course, I had informed Taylor about Martin's passing, but he had said he couldn't make it due to work.
I was going to come home, but the weather turned bad, and my flight got canceled.
Sensing an excuse, I intuitively felt Taylor had something to consult.
So, what's up today? Can I come back home?
The idea of Taylor returning home after becoming an adult surprised me a bit. Feeling more secure with my son than living alone, I was about to express my consent when Taylor surprised me further.
Actually, I got married while on a business trip. What?
Taking a deep breath, Taylor quickly spilled the beans.
The thing is, she has a kid. Still in elementary school and needs constant attention, but since my wife is busy with work and often abroad, I was wondering if you could help us out.
I've always loved children, so despite the surprise, the news of having a granddaughter made me genuinely happy.
My wife's name is Ava, and the child is Catherine. Ava's in sales, always bustling about abroad.
To me, a housewife, a woman in sales and traveling the world seemed quite impressive. What's Catherine like?
She's in the 2nd grade, very serious and a good kid. So, when will you move in?
Really? You're okay with it? Taylor sounded surprised, as if my approval was unexpected.
Of course. I'd be happy if it becomes livelier.
Thanks, that really helps. Though Taylor hastily hung up, I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to feel lonely from next month. As I busied myself with cleaning the house and buying what was needed, time flew by, and before I knew it, the day Taylor and his family were supposed to return was upon us. I tried calling Taylor to ask various things about preparing a room for my granddaughter, but couldn't reach him. Since that call from Taylor, there had been no contact at all. Despite feeling anxious, the day they were said to arrive finally came. Not knowing what time they would come back, I felt restless all day. Just as I had finished tidying up every corner of the house, the doorbell rang. At the door, Taylor and his family were lined up. Welcome. As I opened the door, I locked eyes with Taylor, who awkwardly scratched his cheek.
I was worried because you wouldn't answer my calls, no matter how many times I tried.
Sorry, I've been busy.
From now on, since we'll be living together, it's important to keep in touch even if you're busy. Got it.
With that, Taylor turned towards the beautiful woman and the quiet child standing next to him. Let me introduce them. This is my wife Ava and my daughter Catherine. Nice to meet both of you. I've been looking forward to living together. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having us. Ava, stunning enough to catch even a woman's eye, spoke with a voice as clear as a news reporter.
Nice to meet you, Harper. I look forward to getting to know you.
Ava seemed lively, a contrast to Catherine, who was quiet. However, she greeted me properly, a serious child just as Taylor had described. "Just call me Grandma." After showing them their rooms, a moving truck arrived shortly after. As the movers unloaded box after box, most were taken into Ava's room. I offered to help with the overwhelming amount of boxes, but was declined because they felt bad for moving in without contacting me. I decided it was best not to intrude too much on their privacy. After all the boxes were moved, the movers left. Taylor, now a bit settled, spoke solemnly to a photo of his father. "It all happened so suddenly, Dad.
I heard a truck ran a red light and was about to hit a child. He died trying to save the kid. Sounds like Dad." "Yes, and the child was saved. The parents were very grateful. As a father, I need to take good care of Catherine too."
Despite his busy work, Taylor seemed concerned about not spending enough time with Catherine. While we were talking, Catherine, who had finished unpacking, stood quietly in a corner of the living room. Taylor then left to finish unpacking. "Catherine, are you hungry?"
"No, I'm fine."
Catherine's mature response made me think she was shy. "How about having some tea with me, Catherine?"
"Thank you."
It might take some time to get closer to Catherine. As I prepared the tea, I tried to find a way to bond. "What do you like, Catherine?"
"Nothing in particular."
"Any food you like, anything at all?"
"Nothing."
I was taken aback by Catherine's reluctance to engage in a conversation. Just as I was struggling to find a topic, Taylor, who seemed to have finished unpacking quickly, returned to the living room.
"Since I'm always abroad, I don't have much stuff, so it was quick."
Laughing, Taylor's words made me imagine how busy his life must have been. "Good work. I'm about to start dinner, but does anyone have any dietary restrictions? We can eat anything." At Taylor's words, Catherine also silently nodded. "Understood." I decided to make beef stew for dinner. And as it simmered, Ava walked into the living room.
"It smells wonderful."
"Thank you. I just finished making beef stew."
"I've been traveling so much, I'm really happy to have a homemade meal for a change." "It must be tough for you, Ava."
"Yes, the company is on the verge of bankruptcy due to a failed business venture. The salary is low, so I'm traveling to various places for work." Hearing about the difficult situation Ava was in, my heart ached, and I decided to support her as much as I could.
"Ava, feel free to rely on me anytime."
Ava nodded with a smile, saying yes. And so, our life together with Taylor and his family began. However, Ava and Taylor were away from home more than I expected, and I couldn't help but think Catherine must feel quite lonely in this situation. Though there's no blood relation, I sympathize with Catherine's situation. And have to take care of her while being careful not to overstep. After 6 months of cautiously navigating our relationship, I noticed Catherine often studying in the bathroom. But Catherine has her own room. Today, as she came out of the bathroom with her study materials, I immediately asked her,
"Catherine, why do you study in the bathroom? Isn't your room more spacious?"
But she didn't answer, just hung her head in silence.
"You can tell me anything, you know?"
I said gently, looking into her eyes, but Catherine just clenched her mouth shut and shook her head.
"Let me know when you're ready to talk."
Eventually, she didn't say anything and quickly went back to her room. I should ask Ava when she comes back today. Since we started living together, Taylor has been good about keeping in touch. I received a message that Taylor would be back next week, and Ava was returning today. As the message said, Ava came home that evening.
"I'm home."
"Welcome back." Ava entered the house, carrying a large suitcase.
"This time, work went well."
She seemed in a good mood, singing a trendy song while unpacking. I admired how capable she seemed as I waited for her to settle down. While I was in the kitchen, Ava came to get a drink, and I immediately asked her about Catherine.
"Ava, I've noticed Catherine often studies in the bathroom. Do you know why?" "I asked Catherine about it before, and it seems like she can concentrate better in the bathroom." "Is that so?" Maybe she likes small spaces.
The bathroom is the quietest place, where it's hard to hear outside noises. So, don't worry about it. Indeed, the bathroom is quiet and kept clean, which might make it an easy place to concentrate. Though I was skeptical, I decided not to pry further. The next night, Ava said she was going on another business trip and left the house. Both of them are hardly ever home. It's practically just Catherine and me living together. Wanting to get closer to Catherine, I started off with safe conversations. Is school fun?
It's okay.
Which class do you like best?
They're all the same.
Her monotone answers left me at a loss for what to ask next. It was unusual for conversation to not flow, even considering her shy nature. Thinking it might be best to avoid school topics, I changed my approach. What do you do on your days off?
Homework.
Catherine's expression remained dark, her tone stiff. Feeling like pressing further might make her dislike me, I dropped my shoulders. You're working hard, that's admirable. I'll get dinner ready, so take it easy. At my words, she seemed a bit relieved, nodded, and went back to her room. What to do? As I headed towards the shower, pondering, I glanced at the bathroom and noticed the door was locked. Was she holding it in? If that was the case, Catherine's aloof behavior made sense. I decided to try talking to her again when the timing felt right. From the next day, I started speaking to her more, observing her mood, and even took her shopping with me on weekends. Today they have a special on meat. How about pork sauté for lunch?
Yes.
Do you like pork sauté, Catherine?
Yes.
Catherine's demeanor was unchanged, but I was beginning to read her expressions a bit more. She had tensed up a bit when I mentioned pork sauté. But I also want to eat hamburger. Maybe we should do hamburger instead.
Yes.
This time, it seemed I had guessed right, and Catherine nodded with a lively voice. Then, one day, as I felt we were gradually getting closer through these subtle exchanges, we received a phone call at home.
Hello?
This is Walker, Catherine's homeroom teacher. Are you a family member of Catherine?
Yes. I'm Catherine's grandmother.
It was my first time receiving a call from the elementary school, so I was anxious.
Catherine has developed a high fever and has been unwell, and unfortunately, our school nurse is not available.
What? I'll come to the school right away. Interrupting the teacher, I hurriedly got ready and rushed out of the house. Upon arriving at the school and being led to the nurse's office, I rushed to Catherine's side.
Catherine? It's Grandma. Do you recognize me?
My granddaughter looked at me with moist eyes, breathing heavily in discomfort.
Grandma. You don't have to force yourself. I'm here, so you can relax.
I wiped Catherine's sweat with the towel I had brought.
You're sweating a lot. Do you think you can drink some water?
After inserting a straw into a bottle of sports drink, I watched her condition.
Grandma. I'm thirsty.
Catherine, who usually speaks formally, was talking like a normal child, clearly feeling under the weather. Even though she spoke in fits and starts, I firmly thought to myself that I would definitely help her. I supported Catherine's head as she tried to sit up slightly and held the straw to her lips. After taking small sips of the sports drink, Catherine managed to drink half the bottle and then lay back down on the bed.
I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Catherine. It's natural to take care of you when you're suffering like this.
I stroked her head and smiled gently. After a while of looking uncomfortable, Catherine gradually stabilized as I continued to care for her earnestly. Just then, the homeroom teacher, Mr. Walker, came to check on us, so I asked him to arrange a taxi. Soon after receiving word that the taxi had arrived, I supported Catherine carefully as we made our way home.
Catherine, are you okay?
I kept speaking to her, matching her pace as we slowly entered the house. Her room was on the second floor. Considering the difficulty of climbing stairs, I decided to let her rest on a sofa on the first floor, covered with a blanket. I continued to take care of Catherine tirelessly, making oatmeal, wiping her face with a wet towel.
Grandma, thank you. It's all right. I'm always here with you, so rest easy.
When the fever began to subside, Taylor came home.
Catherine, are you okay? Welcome back. She's settled down and sleeping now. I'm relieved. I came back as soon as I got the message from you, but it looks like I left everything to you at a tough time.
It's okay. This is exactly why I'm here for. Taylor, looking relieved, spread out the cold medicine and sports drink he had bought for Catherine on the table.
By the way, where's Ava?
That's the thing. I haven't heard from her. It seems she's far away this time. Maybe there's bad reception. She's on a business trip again? Sounds like she has it tougher than me. I'm worried about Ava, too. I had some suspicions about Ava's absence and how I couldn't get hold of her. Though it bothered me, Catherine was my priority. A few days later, when Ava suddenly returned home, Catherine's health had fully recovered. Unlike the deepening bond between Catherine and me, Ava showed no signs of concern for Catherine.
Ava, I want to talk to you about Catherine. I'm sorry. I was suddenly called into work. Can we talk another time?
I'm worried about Catherine. While you were away, she studied in the bathroom through hot and cold days. That's not normal.
She just finds the bathroom comfortable. Please don't worry about it.
Without air conditioning or heating, she's cooped up in there.
She must not mind it if she can concentrate on her studies.
I have to go now. What she blurted out was a remark I couldn't believe coming from a parent, and I felt a chill down my spine. Ava slipped past me, who was stunned, and left the house. A few days later, with Taylor and Ava gone on yet another overseas business trip, it was just Catherine and me.
Grandma, can I talk to you?
It was as if she was waiting for us to be alone. Catherine looked me in the eyes, almost pleadingly, and began to speak.
What's wrong?
It's better if I show you, she said, pulling me by the hand towards Ava's room. Entering the room, she opened one of the many piled-up cardboard boxes and showed me something.
What's this?
I know, Mom is having an affair.
What?
These are souvenirs Mom bought to cover up her affair with her lover on their trips. I was shocked by her words. But the surprises didn't stop there. Catherine moved towards Ava's laptop, turned it on, waited for it to boot up, and clicked on a certain file, which brought up a password prompt. I really don't want to see this, but... Inside the file were numerous photos of Ava, always with a man by her side.
So many!
The man next to her changed in various photos, many of which showed souvenirs like the ones she had shown me. This is in Hot Springs, and this one's in Hawaii. The dates on the photos corresponded with the days Ava said she was on business trips. I needed to do some research once and borrowed Mom's laptop. Catherine, being in elementary, didn't have a mobile phone yet. So when she needed to look up something, she always said she was using Mom's laptop. I saved my data in a file, but accidentally saved it in the wrong one. Scrolling through the photos, Catherine explained. When I was searching for my data, this was the only file that was locked. She continued in a somber tone, staring at Ava's smiling face in the photos. Curious, I tried entering Mom's birthday as the password, and it opened. After closing the file and shutting down the laptop, she took a deep breath. When I confronted Mom about the affair, she threatened me, saying if Dad and Grandma found out, I'd be thrown out too.
What a thing to say to a child!
Anger welled up inside me towards Ava. She said if I pretended not to see the affair, I wouldn't be thrown out, and she'd get me souvenirs to keep quiet.
To think she'd try to bribe you with gifts bought to camouflage her affair, unbelievable.
Some were forcibly placed in my room. Seeing them constantly reminded me that Mom was cheating, and I couldn't stand it. As she spoke, tears streamed down Catherine's face. That's why I didn't want to be in my room and ended up studying in the bathroom instead. You didn't want to study there, did you? It was so hard.
I've wanted to tell you and Dad for so long, but Mom strictly warned me not to say anything.
Reflecting on it, I realized I rarely saw Ava and Catherine having a good conversation.
Seeing Mom made me afraid of adults and unable to trust anyone.
I see.
But recently, I felt like I could talk to you.
Indeed, since that day, I felt she had started to open up to me. Catherine, looking down, strained her voice out.
I'm sorry for keeping silent. A granddaughter who keeps secrets doesn't deserve to be here. Please, kick me out along with Mom. There's no way I'd do that.
Anger reaching its peak, I made Catherine put her head back up and immediately messaged Taylor. The phone rang shortly after.
Mom, is what you messaged true?
His voice was hurried, conveying his panic.
Yes, Catherine told me, and I saw it myself.
This is an emergency. I'll talk to the company and come back home immediately. Hearing our conversation, Catherine looked anxious.
Don't worry. I will protect you no matter what. Thank you.
Taylor really did come back quickly. Upon his return and after seeing the evidence of Ava's affair, Taylor was furious. It was understandable.
We'll confront Ava as soon as she gets back.
I had never seen Taylor this angry before. I nodded at Taylor's words, waiting for Ava to return. A few days later, that day arrived.
Ava, we need to talk.
As soon as Ava got home, Taylor opened his mouth.
What is it all of a sudden? I'm tired from just getting back. Have you been cheating? What are you talking about?
Ava's obviously irritated demeanor made it clear she was playing dumb.
Those souvenirs, they're matching ones you got with a man, right? They're matching ones with Catherine. I saw photos of a man holding those souvenirs. What? Did you go through my computer without permission?
Ava was desperate to deflect from the truth that was becoming impossible to hide.
You locked the files because you didn't want them seen, right? So it was Catherine who told you. How dare she?
Ava exploded in anger and lunged at Catherine, but Taylor restrained her just in time. Was Ava always like this? It was as if she was a different person.
Let me go! How dare you spill the beans?
Taylor held her firmly, restricting her movements, as she spat out insults.
You're a complicit in this, you'll be thrown out too. Catherine did nothing wrong.
I stepped forward to protect my granddaughter.
I called your company, and the on the verge of bankruptcy story was a lie, wasn't it? I did nothing wrong. Stop accusing me.
Ava stubbornly refused to admit her wrongdoing, but her limits were clear.
Your boss said your salary was reduced because you caused problems with men within the company. We'll be seeking compensation from you as well as the men involved in the divorce settlement.
Finally, Ava stopped resisting and slumped down. Silence fell over the room.
I feel sick because of you all. I'm going to the doctor's later.
After exchanging a look with me, Taylor let Ava go. She left the room as if she was drained of all energy. Ava indeed went to see the doctor. Apparently, she had contracted a troublesome disease overseas and needed to focus on treatment.
She's paying for her reckless lifestyle. I'll have to inform Ava's company,
Taylor said after receiving a call from the hospital and relayed the information to Ava's company. Ava's reputation worsened, and after the disease came to light, she had trouble with the men she had been involved with and ended up resigning.
It looks like we can finally settle down. Thank you, Dad. It's what family does.
Taylor said so, with his words heavy with resolve. After the turmoil subsided and we started to regain our normal life, Taylor received a call. He frowned immediately and answered.
Don't joke with me. We're done. It's your problem now.
He hung up abruptly.
We might need to change our phone number, he muttered. What happened? It was Ava. She said she's broke because of the compensation and asked for help. How selfish. Exactly. She's getting what she deserves from the men she was involved with.
It looks like Ava tried to work in the entertainment district, making use of her beauty. But her illness made it difficult to find work, leading to a life of poverty.
Catherine suffered so much, it's only right Ava faces the consequences.
Catherine was remarkable for enduring it all alone. As I reflected, Taylor spoke with determined eyes.
I'll do everything so Catherine never has to suffer again.
It seemed the ordeal made Taylor want to rebuild his relationship with Catherine, leading him to request a transfer to a domestic role. Spending more time at home, he grew closer to Catherine, strengthening their bond. Lately, Catherine's smiles had become more frequent.
Catherine, is there somewhere you'd like to go?
The aquarium.
Then let's go today, all three of us. Taylor's off too. Yay!
I love you, Grandma. Jumping up and down, she smiled happily. Catherine's joyful laugh warmed my heart.
I love you too, Catherine.
Holding Catherine's hand as we set off, I promised myself to protect this smile forever.